Hi Environment Champions, my name is Sonia and we are going to be cooking today, and what we're making is fruit leather. So fruit leather, it possibly sounds a bit strange, but you've probably come across it before. You can buy it commercially, but this is some I made a few weeks ago, and you can see that you can cut it up and you can make lovely long strips of delicious dried fruit. This particular one, all the ingredients for this one was free because I found apples in a local park, as well as some wild plums and wild blackberries. So we're nearly past blackberry season, so I don't think you're going to be able to do it with blackberries, but there's certainly still some wild apples out there. But if you can't find wild apples, that's absolutely fine. You can use shop bought apples as well, or you can really use any fruit that you would like. So the one I'm making today, because we don't have blackberries, I had a few plums left over in my fruit bowl, and I've got some apples, and I have been stewing them down. So what you need to do to stew them down is you take your fruit. I've actually got 4 apples, but I'm going to show you how we're going to cut it. So if you're using apples, you need to take out the core and take out the seeds. Try not to waste very much of the flesh. You can see where I've taken out the core, there's hardly any core removed. And what we're going to try and do, and I'm leaving the skin on as well, is just to chop it up as small as you can. So you might need a grown-up to help you with this. And there you go. So I've got some very, very small pieces of apple. And what we're going to do, and you could even grate that as well. So what we would do is we would pop that apple into a pan with a splash of water and any other fruit. So if you wanted to use blueberries or raspberries, try and stick with seasonal fruit, but any fruit you like. It's nice to have apple as a base, but you can use any fruit. So as I said, in this pan here, I've got 4 apples and 2 plums, but you could use blueberries, apricots, peaches, anything you wanted, depending on what was in season. Remember, it's better to have fruit that's in season because that's better for the environment. Okay, so what I've done is I've cooked my fruit down, and I've put a splash of water in, and I've cooked it down for probably about 15-20 minutes, so the apples are really nice and soft. I did keep stirring it, and I kept adding water if it needed it, but we don't want to put too much water in there because the aim is we're going to dry this fruit out. So I've also put my oven on to the lowest setting. So my oven goes down to 30. If you can put it to 40, 50, that's great. So put your oven on to the lowest setting. Cook your fruit. So we've got the fruit that's cooked like this now. And what I'm going to do now, excuse the noise, is I am going to blend the fruit. So make sure it's blended till it's a proper puree. We don't want any lumps in it. So I'm going to make sure that I've got all the lumps out here, so I am going to blend it for a little bit. So excuse the noise. There we go. Now it does depend on the fruit you're using, but some fruits you might need to cook without the seeds or the core. So for example, the plums that I used, I pulled the stone out of the middle of the plum before I put it in, obviously. The apples, you could see I took the core out. There's a few lumps in there still. With the blackberries that I cooked last time, I didn't strain them, I left the seeds in, and the seeds were really nice and crunchy. So if it's seeds that you can eat, like blackberry seeds or raspberry seeds, you can leave those in. If there are other seeds that might be hard, make sure you remove them. So I'm going to give this another quick whiz with my blender. Just getting those last lumps out. So here we go. Not to waste any of that, so I'll leave that there for later. And here we go. So we've got a lovely puree. It's quite thick, so we didn't want too much water. If you found that you had too much water in, what you would need to do is cook it for a bit longer, so you could cook the water out. Now what I'm going to do first is have a little taste to check for sweetness. It might be perfect as it is, but sometimes when we cook fruit, it can taste a little bit sour. If it is a little bit sour, you can add sugar or honey, or I've got xylitol here, just according to your taste. So let's have a little taste. I think that's lovely without any sugar, so I'm not going to put any sugar in. And that's going to be all the more healthy for my son, who will eat this when he comes home from school. So what I have is an oven tray, and I've lined it with some silicone paper. So I don't know if you can see this silicone paper here. The silicone paper is great for reusing instead of using baking paper that you have to throw away after each go. You can use this silicone paper and you can use it again and again and again. And also it's very good to stop things like this from sticking. If you don't have silicone paper, of course you can use baking paper, but the silicone paper is good. So I'm going to put half on here for now, and I'm going to spread it as thinly as possible. So I'm going to spread it around my tray, staying on the silicone paper. Sorry, I've got some puree on my hands here, so give my hands a quick wash. And you're going to try and spread it as thinly as you can. So you're going to have a nice thin layer. Mine is a little bit lumpy. I would have blended it for a bit longer, but it was a bit noisy, wasn't it? So you might find that you can do this over 2 baking trays. You might find that you would just use 1 baking tray, but you want to get it fairly thin, but you don't want to see too much of the baking paper underneath. So this is quite handy that mine is black, so I can actually see through the fruit and see which areas are thicker and which are thinner. So this is got to be really careful on this job, and spread it out fairly flat, and as flat as you can get it. It probably won't be perfect, but as flat as you can get it. So mine, I've probably got enough for 1 large baking tray and 1 small baking tray, and I've still got a lump of apple in there, so I'm going to get rid of that. And that's almost there. Try and get the edges flat as well, and ideally you don't want anything too thick, because if you have a part that's too thick, it will take a lot longer to cook, while the rest is already cooked, or dried rather, because that's what we're going to be doing. So here we go. So I've spread it relatively thinly, trying to get those corners fairly flat. Hope you can see that. So you can see that it's not perfectly flat, but it will do. And what I'm going to do, I've put my oven on, as I said, to about 30 or 40 degrees, or whatever the lowest temperature your oven can go. And it does take a long time to cook, but we don't need to be there. So last night I put one in about 8 o'clock, and it should be ready now because it was on a very low setting. So I'm just putting this one in the oven. Here we go, and here's one that I've just taken out of the oven. I can hold it without oven gloves because it's not too hot. And here is my silicone sheet. And what you're looking for to make sure it's ready is that it's not tacky, so it mustn't be sticky. Now mine is a little bit sticky in the middle here, so I might put it back in for a little bit longer. But if it is a bit sticky, it doesn't matter if you're going to eat it straight away. If it's a bit sticky and you want to make it last for a long time, then you do need to make sure it goes back in the oven to dry out. But my son will eat this today, so it won't be a problem. So what I'm going to do, you can see here, hopefully this will work. I can peel my fruit leather away from my silicone sheet, and there is my lovely sheet of fruit leather. You can see the places where it was a little bit thicker and the places where it was a little bit thinner, but that is a really nice piece of fruit leather. Now what you can do with that, you could scoff it like that if you wanted to, but the nicest way to do it is to cut off the edges and then eat those edges and then cut it into strips. So I'm going to get a bigger chopping board. I'm going to put it on this chopping board and I'm going to cut the edges off just because I want it to look neat, and actually scissors is the best way to do this. So let's get some scissors. And there we go. So we're going to chop the edges just to make it look neat, like so. So you can see we've got a tiny bit of fruit leather there, and I'm going to cut the edges down because the edges often are quite a lot thicker as well, and unless you're really good, you're probably not going to get them perfectly straight. Not that it really matters because it can be eaten like this. So I'm going to cut my leather here. And now with the oven temperatures, what you will need to do is you will need to check it. So as I said, mine was on 30 degrees overnight, so that's fine. If you put it on in the evening, and you can come down and you should have fruit leather ready. If your oven doesn't go down that low, just keep checking. It might be that you put it on at 70 degrees and it will take maybe 5 or 6 hours, but you will need to check. So you can put it on in the morning and then check again in the afternoon. So here is my fruit leather that's kind of square. It's not perfect, but it's kind of square. And what I'm going to do now is cut it into strips and then roll it. And then I can store that rolled in the fridge. It will store for several months actually, if it were perfectly dry. If I want to store it for longer, I can store it in these little strips in a Tupperware, and it will last for many months in the freezer. So here I've cut some strips of my fruit leather, and what I'm going to do is roll it up. Doesn't need to be rolled up, it can be eaten just like this, but I think it looks quite pretty rolled up, and it does resemble other ones that you can buy in the shops. So there, I don't know if you can see that, is my little rolled up fruit leather. I hope you enjoy. Take care everyone, bye bye.